Now, first of all, by way of explanation, I'm taking the same subject that I took this morning at the Warrigans. Pardon? We can stand it again. And the recording somehow went amiss, so we don't have a recording of it, but we do hope to have a recording this afternoon, perhaps on, are we doing video and audio? All right. From our childhood up, many of us have been conditioned by a process that we've been unaware of, that has carried on through the years and has become a natural part of life for every one of us. And Sunday keeping, for example, is a part of that. If you didn't grow up as a Seventh-day Adventist, you grew up accepting Sunday and Easter and Lent and all of the things with which we are familiar today have become a part of our system, especially for non-Seventh-day Adventists. And by this we can see the extent of conditioning that goes on in the world. And it's really a brainwashing that the devil has somehow put into place. And so the subject I have today has two titles to it. One is called Historic, how would I call it, Perpetuation. So you know what I mean by that now. And the other one is Bury Christmas. Bury Christmas. All right. We'll begin our subject then with Matthew 2, verse 1. Matthew chapter 2 and verse 1. Reading from Matthew 2, verse 1. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. Now, there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that our Lord Jesus was born on the 25th of December. So having laid into our subject, we now give the rest by way of explanation. History does not record for us, of course, the date of Jesus' birth, and the Bible is entirely silent on this matter, as you're probably well aware. And in fact, it is quite clear that God himself does not want us to know, or else he would have told us this in his word. Now, December the 25th has been handed down to us by the Roman Church as a traditional date for the birth of Christ. And this date, however, was set by Pope Julius and all of Christendom with few exceptions. For example, one of the exceptions would be the Greek Orthodox Church, which puts the date of Jesus' birth at January 6. Well, all of Christendom has followed, including some Seventh-day Adventists too, and quite a number of Seventh-day Adventists. And in fact, if you go to many of our churches today, you'll find the children are singing songs about the birth of Jesus, and they're taught in stories that this is the time when Jesus was born. Now, we've never held this kind of teaching as a church until recent times. And in fact, I have an article called The Special Charity for Christmas. It's written in story form. It came out in the Port Macquarie Express, Wednesday, November 29, 1995. The author is Edna Heiss. And in the second last paragraph, Christmas is the birthday of our Lord after all. And a few lines down, I am also allowing them the honor of giving to the one whose birthday it is. So 3 times in these paragraphs, we have this repeated. And the final paragraph says, that's why I love Christmas. I can give my gift to the Christ whose birthday it is, while not ignoring my special friends. This shows a conditioning effect that this has had on all of us in the church, and this goes over the centuries of time. Now, the verse that we've just read to introduce our subject tells us that Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king. Now, evidence is available to prove, and it's historical evidence, that Herod died in March of the year 4 BC and was still alive when our Lord was born. That's what this verse says. And Jesus was born in 4 BC then, and this is in harmony with the great prophecy of Daniel chapter 9, which of course, as you know, deals on the cleansing of the sanctuary and so on in heaven, and pinpoints a time when Jesus would be baptized and also the time when he was crucified. And we know that Jesus was 33 years of age when he was crucified in AD 31. Right. Now, working backwards, and remember, we have to drop a year when crossing the BC AD line, and we arrive at 4 BC for the actual date of his birth. That's the year, but we can't get any further than that, any further information. Now, we read from verse 13 of the same chapter that you have there about the wise men, and we'll come to them a bit later. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. Now, I want you to notice that this word child is used here, not the word babe, which is just file away in your minds. There are two different words in the Greek for this. And verse 14, when he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. So looking at this, Jesus stayed in Egypt till the death of Herod in 4 BC. And Jesus was born before that date. All right. Now, while we do not know the exact date, it is obvious that Jesus was not born on the 25th of December. All right. In the Gospel of Luke chapter 2 and verse 1, we read that Caesar Augustus had issued a decree that the whole world was to be what? Taxed. That's correct, was to be taxed. And he will not have populations traveling to the various centers to be enrolled and taxed in midwinter. Now, December 25 in the northern hemisphere is the coldest time of the year, even in Jerusalem. And since Caesar Augustus, of course, ruled all of Western Europe and cleared down through there right down to Palestine and right to Jerusalem, well, it would have been chaotic for thousands of people to go to certain centers through snow and over snow-capped mountains to be enrolled and for taxation purposes. So, and it does snow even upon Jerusalem too from time to time. And there are records of soldiers in the Second World War writing home to tell how it snowed in Jerusalem. Well, there you are. Pastor Anderson said it was snowing when he was there. And one traveler, world traveler, remarked that the coldest night he'd spent anywhere in this world while he was traveling was in Jerusalem. And there it can be cold enough to kill a man. So you can expect that sheep will not be left out, neither will the shepherds go out. And especially when they didn't have the kind of sleeping bags we have today. And it seems more than likely that the sheep were in their folds and the shepherds wrapped up very warmly. And so it is highly unlikely that we would have this situation. The early Christians actually differed widely as to the date of Jesus' birth. And you get dates like January the 2nd, May the 20th, April the 18th, March the 28th, January the 6th. These are just some of them. And in fact, at least 136 different dates have been set at one time or another for the birth of Jesus. And one writer even states that 14 Christmases are celebrated in Jerusalem every single year. Yes. Well, you'll run out of days of the year, wouldn't you? One's got to be right. So here they are, all in different dates. And during the protectorate years of Oliver Cromwell of England, a decree was passed forbidding the celebration of Christmas on December 25. You see, like the Scots, they regarded it as a pagan holiday. And the Catholic Encyclopedia mentions March 28 as a possible date, April the 19th or the 20th, and May 20 as dates advocated by early writers. And it adds, and I quote from this, Lupi has shown that there is no month in the year to which respectable authorities have not assigned Christ's birth. And these are respectable men. So they've used every month of the year. And this, of course, is from Volume 3, page 724. And it's quite clear then that they have no idea at all when Jesus was born. But it is evident that it was not in the middle of winter. And that's where the weight of the evidence focuses. And the first time that December 25 was put forward as Christ's birthday occurred after the 4th century after Christ's birth, or about the 4th century after Christ's birth. Now remember that the apostles all died before the end of the 1st century, AD 100. And the book of Revelation was written before that, and as 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 3 states, that there would come a falling away from the truth of God. Isn't that correct? So the church fell away until it went right down into the Dark Ages. It kept falling and falling. And by the 4th century, it had fallen away from much of the Bible teaching. And not only that, but paganism itself was creeping into the church. Now the early Christians, about the 4th century, with the development of the later bishops of Rome into the papacy and so on, they taught an animosity against the Jews, and part of the reason was to change the biblical Sabbath to a Sunday, among other things. So they hated the Jews, and they were anxious to win the pagans over. And gradually, in their zeal to win the pagans, the church adopted doctrines and arguments to harmonize with them until they were as far away from the teaching of Jesus as they could be, and of the Jews. Paganism rolled into the church like a mighty tidal wave, and it just eclipsed the truth of God. And instead of God's truth, it was nothing but baptized paganism that ruled through the Dark Ages. Church members drifted and drifted away from the early Christian standards and principles until the church, which started out as the light of the world, now was dragging the whole of so-called Christendom back into the Dark Ages. So they went from light back into darkness. And among the many unbiblical traditions they adopted from paganism was December 25 as a traditional date for the birthday of Jesus. Now, from the Encyclopedia of Biblical, Theological, and Ecclesiastical Literature, Volume 2, page 276, we note these words. The observance of Christmas is not of divine appointment, nor is it of New Testament origin. The fathers of the first 3 centuries do not speak of any special observance of the Nativity or the birth of Christ. This date of December 25th goes much further back into antiquity than is generally supposed. It was celebrated, there's that word, you see. It comes up, doesn't it, from time to time? Celebrate. All right. It was celebrated as the birthday of ancient Persian sun god Mithras, whose religion was a rival of Christianity during the early centuries. That statement is taken from Encyclopedia Britannica, the 11th edition, volume 18, pages 622 to 624, covers a great deal of this in here. So does, of course, the book, The Two Babylons, from which I'm going to read a little bit later. But let's look at another side of the picture. Turn to Genesis 10, verse 8. And here God will show us some very, very interesting things. Now, bear in mind that Genesis 10, when you read there, of course, we're reading from the time immediately after the flood had taken place. And the verse here says, Genesis 10, verse 8, and Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth. Now, other translations say he became a despot or a tyrant in the earth. Now, Nimrod set up a counterfeit system to the truth of God. And at that time, there was only one family line, that was the descendants of Shem, who were standing for the truth of God. Only one family line. And you remember those days, the Bible describes them as the sons of God married the daughters of men. And the sons of God, of course, are those families, not just men, the families of those who stood for truth. And the daughters of men represented those who departed from the truth. And instead of remaining separate, they began to mingle. And of course, this created another problem as well. So Nimrod became a dictator, and he set out to introduce a new system of religion that would rival and counterfeit the truth of God. So he was the one who originated Babylon. Look at verse 9. It says in verse 9, he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Now this word is translated as against the Lord. Remember, as you read this, it's not for the Lord, it says before him. But he was still against him. And that's how other translations have it. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before or against the Lord. And verse 10 reads, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, or Babel. We get this word Babylon from this. And in fact, the margin reads Babylon if you've got a marginal reading there. And Genesis 11, verse 31 states, now you've got the one, Nimrod starts up Babylon. All right, now look at Genesis 11:31. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abraham's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. So here you find the other stream. And these two streams have continued down through history. Now, here's what we have. We have Nimrod setting up a counterfeit religion with Babylon as his headquarters. While God takes a man out of Ur of the Chaldees, or like all of us, out of Babylon too. Because that's where we've all come from. Some of us, by the way, and some of our habits and beliefs are still in there, believe it or not, even among concerned brethren and sisters. Christmas is one of them. So God takes a man out of Ur of the Chaldees and puts him over there in Canaan to represent the truth of God. So here we find the two opposed. And through Abram came, of course, the city of Jerusalem. And from this point on, right throughout the Bible, you read of these two cities, Babylon and Jerusalem. In fact, the Bible is really the tale of two cities. That's what we have, Babylon and Jerusalem. And they run right through to the last book of the Bible. And there you will read of the doom forever of Babylon and the exaltation forever of the New Jerusalem. And in these two cities are centered two very different kinds of worship. One, the very truth of God, and the other, the counterfeit, paganism. A paganized religion. Or a religiousized paganism, whichever way you look at it. Two very different kinds of worship. And God took Abram out of Babylon and used him to establish the truth of God in this earth. Now, when the city of Babylon was eventually destroyed by Medo-Persia, when? 538? Right, good. 538 BC. The priests fled to Pergamus in Asia Minor, the priests of Babylon. And when the Romans, centuries later, conquered Pergamus, they were very obliging and accommodating to pacify the conquered nations. In other words, the Romans would often take their gods and leave the people with their beliefs. The Romans had enough sense not to interfere with a man's religion. And they were very astute at this. Much more so than governments since that day, because governments will now tend to interfere with religion, and that's what causes the trouble every time. And the Romans understood this long ago, so they did not interfere. In fact, they adopted their gods, and they placed these in the Roman pantheon. And this Roman pantheon, which still stands to this day, I was in it quite a number of years ago, looped around it, but that's the place where they put all these gods, and the word pantheon means a house of many gods. And of course, the gods that they took represented the gods of the nations, and the Romans took the religion of Pergamus and adopted it and adapted it to suit their own purposes. This is why the book of Revelation, when talking about Rome and Pergamus, says that this is where Satan's seat is. To the church at where? Pergamus? This is where Satan's seat is, because that system of religion, originating in Babylon, transferred to Pergamos, and from there to Rome, this religion was a very own religion of Satan. It was a counterfeit of the truth of God, and remember this too, that the devil aims at having whatsoever God has. Anything that God has, he wants as a counterfeit. He's shrewd enough, like political parties, one borrows the policies of the opposition, if they find them good, and use them to their own advantage. So if God has a religion, then Satan's going to have a religion. And in Isaiah 14, verse 14, we find this. He says, I will be like the Most High. If God has a church, then Satan wants a church. So he's got one. And here it is referred to in Revelation chapter 2, verse 9, where our Lord says of those who blaspheme him that they are of the synagogue of Satan. So he's got a church, and he's even got ministers. Look at 2 Corinthians 11, 14 and 15, where we read, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. So he's got ministers too. So he's got a religion, he's got a church, and he's got ministers. And the truth of God is the same. Now you can see the counterfeit. So you see, they operate in a sphere of religion. And the great battle of the ages has not been between religion and no religion. It has always been a struggle between truth and error, between the true religion of God and a false religion. The most dangerous thing on this earth today is not a no religion. Atheism is not much of a problem to God, to the truth of God, but a counterfeit religion that operates as the truth of God while leading men into darkness. This is the most dangerous thing in the world. And Satan knows this very well indeed. The system of religion that originated back in ancient Babylon, behind which was the great master rebel himself, shifted with the destruction of the city of Babylon to Pergamos in Asia Minor, and from there to Rome. Now, Rome is never mentioned in the prophecies of the Bible. Now, notice what I'm saying. Not mentioned, I'm not saying not mentioned in the Bible. Rome is not mentioned in the prophecies of the Bible, but Babylon is. Why? Because Rome was really a continuation of the system of religion that originated in ancient Babylon. It was an echo of the old Babylonian religion. And hence God refers to Rome all along the way through the Bible as Babylon. Or Babel, all right, but he never uses Rome in the prophecies, you see. So Babylonian paganism is the same, only with the names changed. That's all. If you open the Roman Catholic Bible, by the way, a Roman Catholic Bible, to the first epistle of Peter, to where it mentions Babylon, you'll see that they have in the margin, the reading is the word Rome. Isn't that interesting? You go to Revelation chapter 17 in the same Roman Catholic Bible, and you'll find that where it mentions Babylon, they'll tell you also that it refers to Rome. So here, you see there is something on which both Catholics and Protestants agree. Babylon, in the book of Revelation, is nothing else but Rome. Why? Because she adopted the very system that originated back there in Babylon as the great counterfeit of the truth of God. And behind the paganism of Babylon was sun worship. Now notice, if you turn back to Isaiah chapter 14 and verses 12 to 14, here is a verse that's very, very interesting. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount in the sides of the north, and so on. And he finishes up by saying, I will be like the Most High. And you'll notice 5 times he uses a personal pronoun I in these verses. 3 verses. He's an I specialist. Not the kind you'd need, Walt. He's an I specialist. And really, it's a middle letter of pride. It's a middle letter of the word sin. Selfishness, you see. So Satan intended to exalt himself. That's what's happening here. And to set up a religion that would be the very counterfeit of the truth of God. All right. And if you look in the margin of your Bible, you'll find that the word Lucifer means what? Day star. That's right, day star. Go outside on a clear day, and you can't do it today, and look up, and what do you see shining? The sun. And the sun is a star, and the stars are suns. All right. The name Lucifer means day star, the great star you see shining in the day. And the devil set up a religion that was centered in sun worship. All through the Old Testament you'll find that when the people of God drifted away into paganism, they drifted into sun worship. And Baal worship, really speaking, was only sun worship. And I say only, but I mean simply. But it has such ramifications connected with it. And all those systems of paganism in those ancient countries were one and all sun worship, and behind the worship of the sun was the worship of the devil, and it still is to this day. And it's affected all churches, as we shall see. Yes. You go into a Roman Catholic cathedral today, you'll find the monstrance. And the word monstrance means for show. But it's a sun disk. And inside the sun disk, the circle inside, which is blank, is a little silver crescent moon called the lunette. And in the other space left is where the host is placed. Or that biscuit, the wafer biscuit, their wafer god. That's placed there. So you can see that this comes in time and time again into churches. Now, Paul says in Corinthians that when those heathen and pagan sacrificed, they sacrificed to devils. For behind Baal worship and behind paganism was nothing else than devil worship. And devils, of course, are the fallen angels, as we all know very well. And the same thing happened down in Egypt, in fact. But God called Abraham out of Babylon and set up the truth of God once more on the earth. And when Israel drifted back into pagan Egypt, God took them out of Egypt to hold fast the truth of God. And right down here in these last days, the message of God is, come out of her, my people. And you and I are the people to whom he's speaking. He's talking to us, and he says, take my message to the world. We were called out of Babylon, all of us. Now he says, you take the message. And the message is, come out of Babylon, my people. And all the way along, God has been calling people out of Babylon and paganism to stand by the truth of God. God will have a people. And when he called his people out of Egypt, notice what he said in this very interesting statement, Leviticus 18, verse 3. Leviticus 18, verse 3. He says, after the doings of the land of Egypt where ye dwelt, ye shall not do. That's a good clear warning, isn't it? And then he says, and after the doings of the land of Canaan, whither I bring you, shall ye not do. Neither shall ye walk in their ordinances. Now that word ordinance is a very interesting word. You see, friends, these pagans in Egypt and in Canaan had a system of religion. Their ordinances. Now the word ordinance, with an I in it, don't forget, as I said this morning, if you don't put the I in ordinance, you get ordnance, which is artillery. Now we might need that, but we need it from the gospel side. All right, so an ordinance really is ecclesiastical or religious laws and rules. That's what an ordinance is. And this is where many people get mixed up, of course, in Colossians 2, verse 14, with the handwriting of ordinances. So God called them out saying, don't do as these people are doing. Follow me and worship me. This is what he's saying in this verse. Keep my truth, but don't worship me as the pagans worship their gods. And this is very plain to see, isn't it? Now, if you go over to Deuteronomy chapter 12, you will see once again that God emphasizes this in the strongest terms. Deuteronomy 12, and looking from verse 30. Deuteronomy 12, verse 30. God says here, take heed to thyself that thou be not snared by following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God. For every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods. For even their sons and their daughters have they burnt in the fire to their gods. What things soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereunto, nor diminish from it. Now, God is being very strict and very straight with us all here. Don't follow the customs of the heathen. Well, what are you going to do with December 25? See? Now, you see, God is very plain and very simple in what he says. God says, take my commandments and do them. Do not add to them and don't detract in any way from them. He says the same thing in the very last chapter of the Bible, in Revelation 22, 18 and 19, where he says, if any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city and from the things which are written in this book. What a warning. It is important to understand this, because we're going to see how even professing Christianity, like tragic Israel before them, abandoned the truth and the commandments of God and wandered into paganism. And before we conclude today, we will see it quite plainly. Christianity in the 20th century, the century in which we live, is riddled with paganism, which God said they were not to touch. It's hard to believe, isn't it, that in this day and age of enlightenment, of knowledge of every kind, of scientific advancement, we would be riddled with paganism? If you were to tell people that, they would laugh you to scorn. But they would be absolute pagans who would laugh you to scorn.
Man's got to die his way our own.
Yes. We have our own, is right. Turn over to Ezekiel 8, verse 13. God said they were not to touch these things of paganism. Ezekiel 8:13. Israel had sunk into apostasy and idolatry, and God sent the prophet Ezekiel to give them a message of warning. And in vision, Ezekiel was given a view of Israel's abomination and paganisms, described in these words. He said also unto me, turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Now Tammuz was the Babylonian name for the sun god. And when they worshipped Tammuz, they made the sign of Tammuz, which was a T. But how did they make the T in those days? Yes, when the Babylonians made a T for Tammuz, they made it in the form of a cross. So notice where the cross comes from. It goes way back into those ancient times. But read further. Then he said to me, hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations than these. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east. And they worshipped the sun toward the east. What a sight. These men had turned their backs on the truth of God and were down on their knees worshiping the sun at sunrise. When is the sun in the east? Early in the morning. That's correct, yes. They worshiped the sun toward the east and dedicated the different days of the week to their gods. And the first day of the week was dedicated to the chief god, the sun. Hence the name Sunday. That's why it's the chief day of the week, see, as far as they're concerned. And early on this day of the sun, they would rise and bow and worship toward the east, just as many do today in the Easter sunrise services. And you know, even our own church is involved with other churches in Easter sunrise services. They are pagan services. And we have printed papers showing the names of our leaders, representing the division on their great committees for these Easter sunrise services. And what is more, many Christians rise up early and go to their churches, and when they bow down in their churches to worship, they're bowing towards the east. And I was writing on this. I started writing this subject up a week or so back, and I hadn't finished, and I had to go down to Victoria for 3 days to Russell's wedding. And I wrote down there, and on the way back, having researched some of this, by the way, my sources for a lot of this, of course, go back to this book, The Two Babylons, a paper from a biblical research group in America, George Burnside's papers, quite a few sources. And I thought, well, I'll notice a church is coming up. And sure enough, when I noticed a lot of them, the entrance doors to the west, they face the east. Not all churches, though, but the majority that I saw seemed to face the east. God does not want his people worshiping towards an easterly direction.
My face to the rising sun.
Yeah, that's right. God does not want it. And you remember that song's in the hymn book. The new hymn book. That's right. So you see, when they bow down in their churches, they're bowing toward the east. And even some Seventh-day Adventist churches have not taken this into account. God is particular. He means what he says. When we go to a place of worship, we must make sure we're not worshiping towards the east. Little things like this are very important in the sight of God. It all comes from pagan antiquity. And when they made the sign of a cross, the sign of Tammuz, they put the sign of the sun around it. And they made a cross with a circle. If you look up in church steeples, and sometimes in graveyards, but you see the cross with a circle around it. Isn't that correct? That's the disk of the sun. The cross of Tammuz and the sun disk. So it's firmly embedded in the Christian churches. Very firmly indeed. You see, it was the same system of religion that brought Sunday into Protestantism. The very same system. Turn to Ezekiel 6 verse 4. God says there, "And your altars shall be desolate, and your images shall be broken." Now, the marginal reading says, "Your sun images shall be broken." That's interesting, isn't it? Your sun images shall be broken. Ezekiel 6 verse 4. Now, God was very hostile to this sort of thing. And as the Christians were endeavoring to win the pagans, and all the pagans to a man, of course, were sun worshippers, they found the pagans worshiping on the birthday of Tammuz, or the sun, on December 25, long before the birth of Christ. And bear in mind now, of course, that the 25th of December was kept by the pagans for hundreds of years, hundreds and hundreds of years BC. Now, it was not kept as the birthday of the Son of God, but as the birthday of the Sun, S-U-N. And the 11th edition of the Encyclopedia states, in Britain, December the 25th was a festival long before the conversion to Christianity. Now, encyclopedias have it everywhere. There's historical evidence, you see, it's all there. Yes. So in other words, they're saying the 25th of December was a festival long before anyone was converted to Christianity. The old Druids, the sun-worshipping cult of long ago in the British Isles, they kept and they looked towards December the 25th as the birthday of the sun long before they ever heard of Jesus. And the Yule log, now we all heard about the Yuletide, the Yule log and all that sort of thing. Well, the Yule log was used when they sacrificed fire to the sun god. And when the early priests, those early priests went out to convert the pagans of Britain, they found them worshipping the sun on December 25. And they said more or less to them, don't call it the birthday of the S-U-N, that kind of sun, call it the birthday of the S-O-N of God. And here is something else we might find interesting too. Where did the Christmas tree idea come from? Well, just listen to this. It was written a long time before the birth of Jesus, at the time when the people of God were drifting into paganism. It's found in Jeremiah chapter 10, 1 to 4. Everything concerning us is in the Bible. December 10, 1 to 4. We'll have it in two parts. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. That's us, isn't it? Yes. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. For the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs, that's the margins say statutes or ordinances again, those are their religious laws and things. For the customs of the people are vain. You see, they had a system of religion, ordinances and holy days. They had a counterfeit of the truth of God, God says, but he says it's vain. It's vain worship, it's useless worship, he says. But let's read on. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman. With the axe, they deck it with what? Silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. They are upright as a palm tree, which of course was used in Egypt. But speak not. They must needs be borne or carried, because they cannot go of their own strength, that is, or their own locomotion. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. Isn't it marvelous to find this there? And they deck the tree with gold and silver, and they set it up like a palm tree. Yes, good friends, way back there in their worship of the sun, on December 25, they not only had the Yule log, their big dinners and drinks, and all the other trimmings, and their trees decked with silver and gold. Everything that is corrupt went along with Christmas. In those days, wasn't called that. Just a new name today, but it goes with it today. The celebration of Christmas is not in the Bible. The origin of Christmas is not Christian. Christmas is a Roman Catholic holiday. Christ was not born on December 25. The Christmas tree has nothing to do with Christ, and Santa Claus has absolutely nothing to do with Christ either. 2 Timothy chapter 4, and the first 4 verses. 2 Timothy 4, 1-4. The Lord says here, I charge you therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall judge the quick and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom, preach the word. Be instant in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all longsuffering and doctrine. But after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from what? From the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. That time is here. Here. No one knows the exact day when Jesus was born. Since God the Father has kept the birth of Jesus a secret, he must not want us to observe it. Probably a lot of you know this book, The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop. It's a monumental work, a great classic. And this man, who was born last century, this work, by the way, was published in 1916. It's called The Two Babylons, or, and this is its full title, The Papal Worship Proved to be the Worship of Nimrod and His Wife. Who was his wife? Semiramis, that's right. So the two Babylons, or the papal worship, proved to be the worship of Nimrod and his wife. And this is what he says. There's a great section here on festivals, Christmas among them, Christmas and Lady Day and what have you. What's a wassailing bowl? Wassailing bowl, W-A-S-S-A-I-L-L-I-N-G. It's like a big punch bowl. Yeah, a big punch bowl. And they had this in Britain. They still have it to a certain extent. We use it without alcoholic drinks. You know, we hang all the glasses around it. It's a punch bowl. So the wassailing bowl of Christmas had its precise counterpart in the drunken festival of Babylon. And many other observances still kept up among ourselves at Christmas came from the very same quarter. The candles in some parts of England lighted on Christmas Eve and used so long as the festive season lasts were equally lighted by the pagans on the eve of the festival of the Babylonian god to do honor to him. And we're using candles in our churches today. By the way, he talks about England because this man was an Englishman. All right. For it was one of the distinguishing peculiarities of his worship to have lighted wax candles on his altars. This is the pagan god. The Christmas tree, now so common among us, was equally common in pagan Rome and pagan Egypt. In Egypt, that tree was a palm tree. In Rome, it was the fir, which is what we use generally. The palm tree denoting the pagan Messiah as Baal Tamar, the fir referring to him as Baal Berith. The mother of Adonis, the sun god and great mediatorial divinity. Notice how they've copied the terms of the Scripture. And some of this before much of the Scripture was in place, because Satan knew exactly what was going on. Didn't take him long to work it out. And he knew God in heaven. And by the way, there's much more can be added here, because the paper I was reading on this particularly, I didn't want to put too much in, and it seems I've overloaded as it is. But describes, of course, Santa Claus with a big white beard, who can see where children are good or naughty, and he brings gifts, you see, symbolizing God. Only God can read the heart, and God brings gifts like the gifts of salvation, the gifts of the Spirit, you see. Everything is parodied, everything is copied in Satan's great religious system. Everything. There's much more, of course, that goes in here. But to carry on with this man, the mother of Adonis, the sun god, and great, which is, of course, Mithras, or Tammuz, the sun god and a great mediatorial divinity, was mystically said to have been changed into a tree, and when in that state to have brought forth her divine son. And if the mother was a tree, the son must have been recognized as the man, the branch. Yes, that's right. And here's the branch, the man, the branch, you see. You see how close they run in this counterfeit religion to Christ? He's called the branch, isn't he? That's right. You find it in Isaiah. And this entirely accounts for the putting of the Yule log. You see the branch, the wood? Putting the Yule log into the fire on Christmas Eve, and the appearance of the Christmas tree the next morning. Well, you can go on reading some of this. It's from page 97, by the way, of the two Babylons, or the papal worship proved to be the worship of Nimrod and his wife. Very well put. Now then, the Lord has commanded us in Jeremiah chapter 10 verse 2, learn not the way of the heathen. Now that's exactly what we've done. Learn not the way of the heathen. But in various and subtle ways, a Christian has learned it just the same. Only the truth about Christmas can free us from these claims of falsehood and paganism. And there are a lot of people out in this world there, if they understood where it came from, the honest of heart would turn from it and say, right, that's an end of this. Today we say, well, it's only a big commercial thing. It's more. We are following the customs which are anti-Christ. There is no question about it. If we follow Christmas, like Sunday, we wouldn't keep Sunday. Well, then why do we keep Christmas? God is challenging us, you see. And here in John 8:32, he says, and ye shall know the truth. And this is what we're finding out about Christmas, the truth. And he says, and the truth shall make you free. So it's the enlightenment. When we realize it, we say, well, that's it, I'm finished with that. And sometimes we hear the slogan, don't we? Let's put Christ back into Christmas. You ever heard that? But how can you put Christ back into something when he was never there? That's the point, you see. And every time you say Merry Christmas, and just think of this one, you are actually mixing the precious and holy name of Christ with a pagan custom, the Mass. So if somebody says to you Merry Christmas, you say Berry Christmas. They won't you know, I said this to several people coming out of church today. I shook their hand and said, God bless you, Berry Christmas. And they said, Merry Christmas. I said, oh, wait a minute, you said Berry. It's hard, isn't it? We're so used to saying this. When somebody says Merry Christmas, we respond immediately. Well, how are you going to respond now? Yes. Or God bless you, which is a better one than ever. Or Berry Christmas if you want. In Ezekiel 22, verse 26, God says this, they have put no difference between the holy and the profane. They have put no difference between the holy and the profane, and I am profaned among them. And this is what we do when we hold to these pagan customs. And maybe mixing the two, as we've just said, to mix the precious and holy name of Christ with the pagan custom, Christ Mass. You know, when you think of it, the things that have been foisted upon us by the beast, it's enough to gall one, isn't it? Jesus is supposed to be the reason for Christmas. It's supposed to be his birthday, and yet people give their gifts to anyone except Jesus. Isn't that right? If this was your birthday, how would you feel about that kind of a custom? Somebody else got the presents. All right. Well, someone says, what about the gifts the wise men gave? Well, these gifts were not exchanged with each other as we do at Christmas in the first place. And they were not birthday gifts either. What were they? They were gifts brought to finance the sojourn into Egypt. And they weren't given in the manger either. See? Herod sought the child's life. So God made provision and said, get up and go down into Egypt. Moreover, they were not given, as I say, at his birth, but some considerable time later, because you read in Matthew chapter 2, verse 11, says that the wise men came into a house, not a manger. It didn't say they came into an inn. They came into the house. And yet, wherever you go today, you'll find them in the manger, bringing their gifts with the three shepherds. How many wise men were there? What's this one? Doesn't say in the Bible how many there were. We've always assumed three. This is what I'm saying. We've been so conditioned. The Bible doesn't say the three wise men. Look as far as you like. You'll never find it. At least, well, I mean, that's being a reasonable figure, isn't it? That's a reasonable figure. But they could have been as far away as Mesopotamia when they followed that star. And by the way, don't forget that when the Jews reckoned the birth of their children, a child, when he was born, was counted 1 year of age. Yeah. And when he was reached the end of his first year, he was counted as 2 years of age. We do it the other way. We wait till he's lived a full year first. So Jesus was actually, at his birth, was counted 1 year of age.
My Bible tells me that Mary did everything according to the law of Moses.
Yes.
The law of Moses stipulated a period of about 6 weeks between the birth of the man-child until the mother could take the gift to the altar.
That's right. But he was still counted 1 year of age in their reckoning. And their, as we might call their birth certificates. You'll find it too in the Bible commentary, by the way.
Mary didn't bring the child to the temple before the wise men came.
Yeah.
Because when the wise men came, Joseph and Mary went straight to Egypt.
Well, we don't know how straight they went. How soon.
Well, they left at night. And Joseph had a dream.
But the point is, you see, even the Bible commentary, actually the Bible commentary puts the date of Jesus at 5 BC, they said, for their purposes. Well, I don't quite know how they worked that one out. I struggled and wrestled with that one. But the point is, Luke makes no mention of the wise men either in his book. But Matthew does, certainly. But we do know that the wise men came to see them in a house. That's what Matthew says. Look at Matthew 2, verse 11. When they were coming to the house, they saw the young child. So it's quite interesting, and I would say get the SDA Bible commentary on this and see their reasoning and arguments. And they reckon that these wise men could have come from even as far away as the Euphrates and visited Herod and talked with the other people in Jerusalem and followed the star to the house, apparently. But you remember, the only two references to where Jesus was actually born are the inn and the manger, not a house. So it could have been a couple of months. We don't know. So it's interesting to research it. Well, anyway, let's be honest before God about this 25th of December and admit that Christmas Day is a pagan holiday and a deception of the adversary. All right. Why should we celebrate it? It does not have its foundation in the Bible. Christ did not celebrate it or teach us to celebrate it. God did not even make it possible for us to know Christ's birthday. If December 25 was really the birthday of Jesus, you can be sure that the world would have absolutely nothing to do with it. And that's a pretty good sign, isn't it? The world loves Christmas and makes more fuss about Christmas Day than any other holiday. You look at 1 John chapter 2 verse 15. We read this, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him." And over in Luke 16 verse 15, we are told, "That which is highly esteemed among men is abomination in the sight of God." Now that's a pretty good way to gauge things. When the world goes mad after something, question it immediately. It's not a bad principle. You can be pretty safe in following that kind of principle. More people overeat and get drunk at Christmas than at any other time of the year. There are more big parties and more selfish spending at Christmas than at any other season of the year. Doesn't this indicate that the whole system is of the world and not from God? Should we not therefore use our hard-earned financial resources to spread God's last message to a dying world? Should we not turn from this world and its holidays or holy days and from associating the birth of the Holy Son of God with the fables of the world and with apostate Christendom? Of course we should. Let us understand then that the true spirit of Christmas is the spirit of Antichrist. Even in our own churches, we talk about, let's have the spirit of Christmas. What is the spirit of Christmas that you see around you? It's absolute abomination. The spirit of Christmas is a spirit of Antichrist and has nothing whatever to do with God or His Son. Matthew 15 verse 9 says, in closing by the way, "In vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men." So brethren and sisters, the Lord throws a challenge down to us. And He's saying, how do you relate to this particular doctrine? How do you relate to Christmas now in view of what He has told us? And there's much more, by the way, much more evidence than I've given here today. It would take a long time to go through it, especially when people like Alexander Hislop in this book, The Two Babylons, covers a whole section on some of these ceremonies like Christmas, and other books will too. It's quite a broad subject, but it leaves us in no doubt whatsoever that 25 of December is not of heaven's origin. So God bless you as you are confronted. Perhaps maybe you've settled it once and for all anyway. But I find even among concerned brethren and sisters, we have a little bit of different thinking on this matter of Christmas. Let's be clear, it's pagan and it is Antichrist behind it. Thank you.